Good afternoon, everyone. The meeting of the City Providence Housing Crisis Task Force is now called to order. Today is Monday, July the 10th. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chairwoman Harris,
Present.
Vice Chairman Espino, absent. Councilwoman Graves, present. Councilwoman Peterson, present. Councilor Williams is absent. 3 present, 2 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Tonight we have two items on the agenda that we're going to be discussing. The last one is going to be a presentation. So, Madam Clerk, could you please read the first item into the
Item 1, overview of encampment response procedure from MV4, Chief of Staff of Mayor Snyder.
Emily? Could you please join us?
Yes,
And state your name for the record, please.
sir, Emily Cole.
Okay,
All
how
right,
are you tonight?
I'm well, how are you, Councilman?
I am well.
Wonderful, Chair. So this is also going to be a presentation that you have in front of you.
Okay, before we get started, I'd like to entertain a motion to enter this into the records, Providence Housing Support Process. So, motion made, second by Councilwoman Brett. Say that again,
Page number.
Exhibit 5E. You're welcome. We're gonna enter it as Exhibit 5E. The motion is made and second, all in favor, aye. Motion passed. Greetings.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just gonna, there's a 4-part kind of little agenda for us, just so you know what's gonna be in front of you. And I'm gonna hit you with a lot of information. I have a tendency to talk very fast. So if I start going fast, just ask me to slow down. I apologize in advance. So the first thing that we're gonna discuss is how encampments are reported. Then we're gonna discuss the different property types, because each property type has a different process. An overview of the process, and then the city contracts and partnerships that we deploy as part of this overarching process. So the first page is just how encampments are reported. You're gonna see on the left, the different ways that encampments or sites for cleanup are reported to the city of Providence. So the most common one that we receive, definitely PVD 311. That sometimes does come from the private property owner, and so I added that right below. Social media, mostly to our PVD 311 account, other elected officials like our city council people or our state reps or senators, providers and other CEOs, other city staff who may be on property, neighbors of that property. Sometimes they come in via press inquiry, and then sometimes they come in via police reports or a 911 proffer. I can't find a lot of instances of 911, which is why I put it down at the bottom, but I do know that there was at least one, so I thought it was worth noting. Once identified, the following fields are identified for each site. And so we try to do some data compiling while we're doing this to ensure that we know what we're tracking. Both the site of the date of the site reported, the source of how it was reported. So trying to track down how that came into the city, contact information, if it was reported by a member of the public, the exact address of the site, which leads us to the property type and the property owner. Any departments or partners that have been brought in for support, the ward that it's in. Each of these sites has an identified PVD 311 case number, even if it didn't come in via 311 for data tracking purposes. And any photos, descriptions, or census or documentation of the site. So when I say census in this presentation, I'm referring to the total amount of folks that are there. If the initial information in the original report is incomplete, city staff will do outreach to ensure that we have a full and complete picture. And so depending on the property, it depends on the staff that do that. So the next is property types. So there's a few different types of property. There's private property, there's city property. And so I know I threw out some acronyms there, so I'll walk through those. The PPBA, Providence Public Building Authority, the PRA, Providence Redevelopment Authority, schools, parks, and then other city buildings. For state property, BCAM, the department, it's a department at the state, and it handles state property. I don't have that acronym because it's a state acronym. I can follow up with that one. I apologize. I've only ever called it BCAM. RIDA, which is the Rhode Island DOT, I know that one well. And then 195 land, which is just a little bit different. Then the last three are Amtrak, federal property, and university properties. For the most part, those last three are, I have no instances of federal property or university property, but I do have contacts in case that we did receive an encampment or something that was on one of their properties. And I have only 2 instances of Amtrak, and so those ones are, we're not really focusing on right now. The next page is an overview of the process, and so I'm just gonna start with the fact that this all depends on capacity, so both provider capacity and staff capacity. So which order the services are deployed in may vary depending on provider capacity or on EMS capacity. But for private property, it is social service outreach, EMS paired response outreach, which I'll go over these services a little bit more afterwards. I thought it would be helpful, but I wanted to outline the process for you first. And then Providence Police Department, if the individual is trespassed off the private property by the private property owner. For city property, social service outreach, EMS paired response, and PPD response if a vacate notice is issued, and then site cleanup by city staff. If there is a vacate notice issued and anyone is displaced, their belongings are stored at the North Burial Ground and they receive that information. I have no examples of anyone being displaced and they needing their belongings stored since this administration has taken over. But we do have the ability to store them, and the Parks Department has been really gracious and will store anything that we do ask them to store outside of this process as well. The exceptions to that are city parks and city buildings. Folks aren't allowed to be in city buildings after hours, and folks aren't allowed to be in city parks after 9 p.m. State property. So we notify the State Department of Housing first. Simultaneously, we notify social services and EMS paired response. Similarly to city property, it depends on capacity. If EMS is available first, they'll go out. If social services are available first, they will go out. And those social services really do depend on the type of property and the type of encampment that we're hearing, and what kind of services we send out. And I'll go a little bit more into that in the next slide. Amtrak, so Amtrak, most of these places are located along the train tracks, but very close to another type of property. And so we notify Amtrak, but we also simultaneously send out some sort of service response to make sure that the folks have what they need. For the most part, Amtrak has been super responsive. And we had one empty encampment that was just a site cleanup that we worked through with them. That was actually inside the tunnel. So that was more just us getting flagged that there was some debris inside the tunnel, and they were very responsive and quick. The last 2 types of property are federal and university. And if we had a property, we would notify their liaison and work through a similar process if we needed to. But again, we haven't had examples of those types of property, and so we haven't worked through that process. Okay, so this is probably where I'm going to start to go fast and slow me down. But provider and care response is completely dependent upon capacity. I know there's a lot of providers in the room with us right now, and I just want to thank them for all of the work and collaboration over these past few months and past decades that they've been working on this. But this is totally dependent on their ability and their capacity to be able to support. Wherever we need to, we will send out EMS and our paired response team whenever possible. And so these services are not, that I'm going to go over, are not just housing supports, but it's part of the administration's approach to thinking about this as a whole public health approach in crisis rather than solely specific to housing. I know I've heard from a lot of the providers and I've heard from our EMS teams that what we're tackling is not just a housing crisis, but many times behavioral health and substance use is associated with that. So the city has several contracts and partnerships that collectively support this response. The first one that I'm talking about is Impaired. So when I say Impaired, it stands for the Providence Alternative Integrated Response and Emergency Diversion Response Units. So that's a partnership with the Providence Center. I'm not going to go over every single number on this sheet, but if there's something in particular I can help expand upon here or after the meeting, I'm happy to. And these are each with different city departments. And so this took a little bit of collection to figure out where all these contracts live, how much they were for, and what the duration of that was. This program is a behavioral health clinician co-response with EMS And this is actually diverted calls from our 911 system. So after it leaves the state 911, it goes to our dispatch, and then this team is sent out. Right now, we have a gap in service. Our additional paired response clinician is going to be starting on the 31st. And so we're just waiting on the Providence Center to onboard them. However, we are able to use the mobile integrated health unit, which is 2 EMS personnel rather than 1 clinician and 1 EMS. So the next, we're going to move into opioid overdose prevention and substance use support. And so we have a behavioral health contract with Amos House for overdose prevention, outreach, population and neighborhood support, specifically in 0297. Funding sources are above there. We have a contract with Weber Renew. So Weber Renew has been incredible, particularly in areas where we may need close contact with individuals and site cleanup support. Our EMS team also works with them, but we're more than willing to go out and give sharps containers to any site that may need it to help prevent some of the needles from ultimately hitting the ground and having it picked up by someone else. And they've just been incredible, whether it be Narcan training, whether it be sharp containers, really great support and partners. Next one is with systems change strategies. So that's overdose prevention communications and door-to-door outreach in high-need neighborhoods. And that one's coming to an end in the end of August. These are all existing contracts. Next ones are going to be specific to recovery. And so we have our successful safe patients program. So any of our Providence fire stations, you can walk into 24/7 to receive recovery assistance. And so sometimes we actually use that in reverse. If we find someone that needs the recovery assistance, we can bring them to one of the state stations as well. But this is an ongoing contract with the Providence Center. The next one is ICTA, provide funds for individuals in recovery to assist education and access to resources. The next one is health supports to high needs communities. So this is a very cool program, embedded social workers at our Providence Public Library and community libraries. So RFP is open on this one. Very excited about the potential for this partnership. Next one is embedded community health workers in Providence Housing Authority. And so another one that recently opened and has been awarded, and this is a partnership with the Providence Housing Authority. And so there are some of these individuals, or some of these supports rather, are willing to take some of these individuals, even if they don't fall neatly into one of their buckets. And the obviously PHA more than willing to help out. The next one is employment and neighborhood improvement. And so this is from the city's general fund. I know the mayor mentioned this often during his budget address, but this is our program with Amos House, A Hand Up, that provides employment opportunities for people who are struggling financially, but possibly experiencing homelessness, and provides them with both employment and case management. The next one is going to be support services specifically that homelessness. And so we have a partnership with Adoption RI and House of Hope. This is through ARPA. Adoption RI and House of Hope providing intensive direct case management for 26 youth aging out of foster care and formerly unhoused young adults. The next one is Amos House Pathways to Permanent Housing Program. This one also ARPA, utilizing ARPA funds to add a housing care coordinator, providing case management and crisis resolution assistance. I just had checked in with Healthy Communities on that one, and they had estimated 150 households to be served through that contract. Some of these other ones are harder to get drilled down into numbers, but I wanted to get as close as I could, so there were a few of them were able to identify. The Downtown Local Diversion Program with Crossroads, that's designated staff to do outreach and provide housing resources and connections in the downtown neighborhood. I know that Karen is going to speak more about that program, but they often go outside the downtown bounds to help provide supports to folks. Expanded mobile diversion program with Crossroads, that's direct financial assistance for unhoused clients who are looking to transition into housing. And then the last two, one is Family Services of Rhode Island. These are all ARPA funding actually, to utilize ARPA funds to hire a housing navigator to provide case management for 35 unhoused Providence families. That was a pending, these last two were both pending. And then SOAR is through the Rhode Island Coalition for Homelessness and specific to SSI, SSBI outreach. And so that is a list of the majority of our contracts and partnerships that we utilize throughout the process.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee? I go ahead. Councilwoman.
I see funding for everything, I think, but the hand up, the funding, amount.
It's from the general fund,
That's just what I'm saying.
yes. So instead of it being a designated one-time funds, it's in the general fund as a grant money.
One of the things I noticed as you were going through the presentation, most of these, service providers and these, health opportunities are all in my ward. I don't see this. I don't see this on the ground. For someone who spent a lot of time, you know, in the community, moving around in the community, I just don't see it. I see just the opposite. So I'm really interested in going back and talking about some of these providers, especially the ones that's gonna end soon. I think you got a few here, you got a one that's gonna end on August something. Excuse me 1 second,
Yeah.
one of my thing. Let's look at the, let's start with the community over there. Awareness. When were they, when did they set up and how did they do the outreach in the community? How did they reach people? Do you know?
I don't know, which one are you talking about specifically?
Community overdose education and awareness, that's at the Crossroads.
Sure, so that's distance change strategies, is that the one that you're referring to, is that communications and door-to-door outreach?
Yes,
I don't know when the contract started, so the majority, I want to say all, except for the pending contracts, predate me. I can get you their start dates if you would like me to.
yes, please, and
Yeah.
I would also like to know how many people did they serve,
Sure.
during this period of time? Where did they do the outreach? What was the geographic area that they did the outreach or the strategies? That's just one.
Uh-huh.
Another one that was going to be ending soon, I mentioned that. Sorry.
Changes to, 10 from December, for behavioral mental health therapy.
Okay, that might have been the one that I was reading. Also, all these programs that are mentioned, you know, and how, the city get involved. Do the city get involved only through the cleanup, when people call for the cleanup, or maybe report it to 911, is that the only way the city gets involved with? Understanding where these problems are.
So
And
again,
what other connections do we have other than 911 and a cleanup, somebody probably called one?
so EMS, so the fire department, and so part of why we had put the housing support coordinator position in this city budget is to kind of do some of the work that I've been doing and that Rachel's been doing in the Healthy Communities office. And so we're really just trying not to duplicate efforts. And so if we know that service provider is needed at a location, we want to ensure that there's people there for them to provide a service to. So city staff, maybe it's parks, maybe it's public property, depending on the property type.
Graveyards.
Graveyards.
Yeah, I didn't see it mentioned.
Yeah, graveyards, we don't, that's normally private property unless it would be more burial ground, which would be considered city property. But if you're thinking about Grace Cemetery in particular, that's private property. It's been an active site. I can expand a little bit. So I mean, what our role in the city is we intake and then we ask the providers that we have under contract if they can help support us. If they have the capacity, they will go out. If they don't have the capacity, we'll ask EMS if they can go out. Sometimes it's one goes first, sometimes both go at some point, because a lot of times we know that over communication in these instances and really establishing those relationships is important. And so I don't think any one provider is going to go out to one location one time. And the same with EMS. I know one particular instance, we had 10 visits 4 by providers, 6 by prepared response team. And so the same group would go out over and over. And that was just one off the top of my head. I know that I had tried to figure out how many times we had made contact. And so that's kind of our role. And then if we're asked to clean up the site, sometimes we find totally vacated sites that just need cleanup. Sometimes we have to call up a renew to ask them to help us with cleanup. And then sometimes in the case of city park or city property, rather, we might need to secure the property, or evaluate the property, particularly on city property that may have some sort of egress, someone may have broken in, we've had to secure doors and windows.
Now, in these, this is the only, capacity the city have to get involved with these encampments.
Yes.
The city does not go in and see whether there is a safety issue there, or whether people are in dire need of just being off the street completely, whether they, whether they're very ill inside those encampments or what. I'm only talking from an experience that I've had, something that I would never forget. I had an encampment in my ward. I called everybody to try to get help. Everybody. That's why this is not, to me, this is not familiar stuff. And as much as we have been dealing, I say 2020 was the time when we needed people to really be on the ground and helping people at that time. That's when those encampments started popping up all over the place. And there was not that kind of help, that outreach help. I mean, there were outreach workers there, and we were talking about capacity. There, I did see outreach workers there trying to invest, but the city was not there.
So our EMS team does a duty to respond, and so if they're gonna find someone that's in need of care, EMS is going to respond when they go to the sites. One of the main struggles I know for our EMS team is sometimes people aren't quite there when they stop by. And so they'll leave a clean package, or they'll leave a start container, or whatever they think is needed. But I do know that our EMS team has provided wound care, and they have a duty.
And so they go out daily.
They go out per response, so if
Somebody call.
yes.
How do we know how to get to this information? Like, how do we know to make this call to EMS?
So we ask that everything go in through 311. And so if something is reported via PDD 311, that's when the police have.
Oh, okay, they activate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Really nice. Councilman Peterson.
So I love all of the support that we provide, from a city and a funding perspective. I think it's phenomenal. It's nice to know all of the different resources that are available, and just the different programs that are funded in response to what we're trying to do. But one of the questions that I often see get asked and have been asked myself is, what is actually our response as a city? We provide funding. We know that there's encampments out there. We do go out and provide resources when necessary. We team up with, we have partnerships with and coalitions with organizations. What is actually our response? Are we going to continue to help them house there, help them find other spaces to, meet them where they're at? What exactly is our response as a city? Oftentimes, and I'm sure you've heard I know that when I listen to the mayor speak on the radio, he's asked every single time what's happening, where are we going with this? And oftentimes as well, there's an answer of, well, this is actually, the state has to get involved in this portion of it, or the city needs to do more on this end. Or I think it helps us to know exactly what our response is, so that we can see what we can do. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit?
I just want to clarify in the mayor's comments, we specifically, when you go to the radio, is talking that when it's a state property, we have very different abilities and jurisdiction. And so that's a very different part of the process, which is why I try to kind of break down what the different properties are. I think the mayor's position is that encampments are not a safe place for people to live. We've had violence at encampments, we've had fires. I work in public safety often. I mean, my biggest concern is open air cooking, and so we've had a lot of actual fires that have been put out because we've had open flame, cooking. And so I think there's other dangers that come with encampments that concern the mayor and concern our public safety teams. In addition to folks that may be impaired that are at these encampments that the chair spoke about. I believe that this is the mayor's position is that this is what our role is in encampments. There's a whole other arm of this through work that we do with CDBG and funding beds. And trying to increase access to beds, which I know you're a housing crisis. You all know as much as everyone that we are in a housing crisis and that there is not enough housing for folks that may need it. And so there's a whole other arm of contracts and funding that go to support that. It's 3.4 million that the city has put in via ARPA dollars. I don't want to misspeak, so I don't know if it includes some of these contracts. But the last time that we had responded, I know it was 3.4 million specific to housing needs. So where we are funding housing and where we can fund housing, we continue to fund housing opportunities.
Thank you. Yeah.
These two that are pending,
Yes, ma'am.
what are the holders? What are the?
What's pending?
Yes, there's two pending
Yeah.
that I see, I don't know if I can know. The expanded mobile on the version. And the family service of Rhode Island come home program.
So when I did note in pending, it was either that they were in contract or that they hadn't been, the contract hadn't been completed yet, or that the contract hadn't been signed yet. So they were either drafting the contract or they hadn't signed it yet. I did get this update a little while ago, so I can go back and check in with Rachel to see if it had moved along. But this update was as of like a week and a half ago when I pulled all of
So
these.
it's more clerical.
Totally clear. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any more questions from the committee? Chris? Thank you so much.
Thank you,
At least we know
Chair.
we're funding.
What's
I
that?
don't, I say, at least we know we're funding.
Yeah,
I just don't see it.
Yeah, thank you.
It's invisible.
and we can always feel free, because you know, you can all send them to your relative or I, if ever say.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. All right. Madam Clerk, would you please read the next item into our.
Item number 2, presentation of the housing problem solving program from Karen Cemetery, CEO of Crossroads, Rhode Island.
Greetings, please join us at the table. Your name for the record, please. Bring as many people you want. Everybody come. Each of you, put your name into the agenda process. Into the record.
Thank you for having us. My name is Karen Santori. I'm CEO at Crossroads, Rhode Island. I'm Jennifer Watkins, Vice President of Front Desk Emergency Shelters and Housing Problem Solving.
And I'm Ben Haney, I'm the manager for the housing problem solving team.
Okay, so we have a team.
We have our team here.
Before you get started, I would like to entertain a motion to enter this into our records as 5E. Motion been made by Councilwoman Fitch, second by Councilwoman Peters, all in favor, aye. All right.
It's 6F.
Oh, was it 6F? Oh. I'm repeating. That's why we have you wonderful clerks. Stay on track. And I even had the wrong document, 6F. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thanks.
I'm just going to.
Karen, we're gonna, just what we're gonna do, we're gonna go through the presentation and then allow questions that will be here in case there is something that's in the, that we already.
Absolutely.
Do it.
Whatever works for you all.
You just tell them to go to the next page, so I know.
Okay, so I'm not using the presentation yet. I just was gonna say a couple of introductory things.
Just let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to first thank the city and the city council for the support. The work that this task force is doing is really important. I've been watching lots of the meetings by Zoom, so I've been keeping up. So thank you for inviting us. Jennifer Watkins oversees all of our shelter, our front desk at 160 Broad Street, which we do receive some funding from the city for that, as well as the housing problem solving. And Ben and his team are the folks that are doing the work. So Ben will actually be presenting and works in partnership with lots of the folks in this room. Before we get into the details, I want to just add that in addition to the funding that we received from the city, we also do our own fundraising, so we're able to leverage the city dollars that we receive. And add private donors dollars to the city funding so that we're able to spread and do more and more services. So I will hand this over to Ben.
Sure.
And
Thank you, Karen. Thanks for having us. I'm very excited to chat with y'all and present on this. Housing problem solving is something that's been close to my heart for 2 years. It's been what I've been working on every day. So I just want to start with a little bit of an origin story on housing problem solving. Where did this come from? And we'll start with this first slide here. Looking at the coordinated entry system. I know y'all have had a presentation on the coordinated entry system, so hopefully you have a bit more of a grasp on what that is, what that looks like. But maybe this slide helps visualize it a little more. It definitely helps me. Our current coordinated entry system, really, if you look at it, it's kind of like 3 pieces, right? One piece is the call center, right, which they do assessments, folks calling into the call center who are experiencing some sort of housing crisis, are assessed for vulnerability. And then that other piece, they also do the referrals to shelters. The second piece would be referrals to housing interventions, housing first housing interventions. These would be things like rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing. I think you've had a presentation on those. Now, originally, when we rolled out coordinated entry in this state, it was just those 2 pieces. Originally, Crossroads had the call center assessment and shelter referrals. The Coalition to End Homelessness had the housing referral piece. We noticed something at Crossroads over time is that as we add people to these lists, these prioritization lists, whether they're waiting for shelter or they're waiting for a housing intervention, there's not enough resources for all these folks. So what happens is you have a lot of people who end up on these prioritization lists who kind of sit there in their language. It's a terrible feeling. So, in comes housing problem solving. This is an idea where what if we can take a look at those people on these lists, have creative, outside the box conversations to figure out how to help them resolve their own homelessness before a downstream intervention happens. So that's the third piece. That housing problem solving piece started in January of 2021. Really December, but it was right after the close took over the call center piece. So let's talk about housing problem solving, what it looks like. So next slide. Housing problem solving really has 3 main interventions within it. Okay, there's homeless prevention, diversion, a word that's thrown around all the time, and we'll talk a little bit about specifically what diversion actually means and should mean. And then the third piece is rapid exit. Okay, so homeless prevention is an intervention that we can use with folks who are at risk of homelessness, right? We would call them at imminent risk of homelessness, which means that probably in the next 14 days, they're going to be outside or in a shelter. They have not identified their next residence yet, and they're about to lose theirs. If we can have conversations with those folks, explore natural resources, do some strength-based kind of work with them, mine for what's worked in the past, what hasn't, and we're able to keep them safely housed, they don't enter the system, that's when homeless prevention happens. The second piece is diversion. This is the word we hear all the time, but really diversion is a specific intervention that happens on somebody's first night of homelessness. Somebody had a safe place last night. Now tonight, they don't have a safe place. And they're showing up at a front door of a service agency, or they're calling the call center, or they get a hold of us. If we can have a conversation with them and figure out an alternative to them entering our system, we can divert them to a safe place, that's when diversion happens. Now, the third piece is what we're really the most excited about, and most of the numbers that I report on my reports, and a lot of what we're going to talk about the rest of this presentation, happens in the rapid exit piece. These are folks who have entered the homelessness system. These are folks who typically are what HUD would define as category 1 homeless, sleeping in a place not meant for human habitation, or they are sleeping in a shelter. And a lot of these folks are waiting for housing opportunities. Some of them are waiting for shelter opportunities. But if we can have conversations with them and figure out how to help them resolve their homelessness prior to getting a shelter or prior to getting a referral to rapid housing, permanent supportive housing, and we can help them get housed outside the system. That's what we want to do. So the next slide talks about some of the benefits of having a housing problem solving approach. You know, for the people that we're actually working with, because we are working with people, they're not just numbers, right? This is an empowerment thing. We want to help people resolve their own homelessness, right? It's a very important thing for us that everybody we work with is very much involved in resolving their housing crisis. It's for a lot of people, it's the most appropriate intervention instead of a more expensive downstream intervention that maybe has some criteria like you need to be chronically homeless, have a documented disability, these types of things. A lot of folks are not going to qualify for that, and they really just need a short-term case management, something quick to help them resolve the situation. You know, a big thing for us though is the system piece. Like, so for our system, there's two big things that we look at in housing problem solving, and there's the idea of inflow and outflow. There's an inflow into the system, the homelessness, and then there needs to be an outflow. So a lot of what we do is we stop that inflow into the system, is we help people resolve their homelessness before they enter. But once they do enter the homelessness system, we're also working on that outflow piece, and we're reserving those more downstream interventions for the folks who really need it. This really vulnerable population that's having more of an issue resolving their homelessness. We say it for them. Next slide. So since we started doing this in January 2021, our team has had conversations with 2,000. This is numbers from the last day in June. We've had conversations with 2,771 unique households, which is a huge number in this short period of time, a little over 2 years. But the good news is, in that time, we've been able to exit from homelessness and house 834 households. That's a staggering number. But I'll be honest, that number is not just, it's not a win just for our team. This is a community effort. And special shout out to Better Lives Rallying back here and House of Hope who's sitting back here, because they lay a lot of the groundwork sometimes for these things, and they will refer folks to us, and we'll kind of come in and help with that last piece of housing. But really, it really is about all the providers working together to resolve these situations. But housing problem solving has been pretty successful. 834 households housed, and for a pretty low amount of money, it's about $1,800 per household. That's the average that we've spent, which is pretty good. In fact, 30% of the folks we talk to who are experiencing homelessness, we are able to exit from our system before a more downstream intervention. So that's a basic overview of housing problem solving. I do want to focus a little bit on what we do as far as the city of Providence. We are here in the city of Providence, and that's what you definitely care about a lot. So I do want to talk about our next slide. Is our mobile diversion piece that we've been in partnership with the city of Providence for a little over 1.5 years now. We have two, well, for most of the year we have two. Right now we have one, but we're hiring, you know how it is. We have two mobile outreach folks who go out into the city and do the type of housing problem solving work that I mentioned for street homeless folk in the city of Providence. And a lot of times what we do is we kind of we think of them kind of as a almost like a fishing lure to bring back to the rest of the team, right? They're going out, they're finding folks, and they're bringing them to the rest of the team so we can do that housing problem solving work. Because there's a lot of folks that we noticed we were missing because they are having trouble accessing the system, right? Most of our referrals come through the quote unquote system. So it's nice to have eyes in the street with our outreach workers who can find folks who maybe don't want to engage with the system. So since we've been in this partnership, January 2022, just through that specific grant, the city of Providence, we've been able to house 261 households. And those are folks who were literally homeless in the city of Providence, which is a pretty good number. In fact, the next slide is, yes, each one of those stick figures represents a household. And yes, that's 261 on there, and yes, I had to skip lunch to put 261 stick figures on the slide. And I believe my slide there was PowerPoint, I got converted to PDF, but if you go to the next slide, there was a cool little impactful thing where those, those start disappearing, and I was gonna say something really fancy through it, but it's okay. That was Karen's fault for getting rid of my PowerPoint animation. So that being said, the next slide just kind of goes to some specifics, which I know everybody likes to see. What kind of assistance are we providing for these folks? So of that 261 households in the city of Providence, this is the kind of stuff we've provided. We provided rental assistance, security deposits, transportation out of state to a safe destination. We don't just put people on buses. If somebody comes to us and they say, I am from Wisconsin and things are not going too well to be here, I have a safe place to go in Wisconsin, we will call that safe place. We will confirm, can they stay with you and live with you, and is it safe? If it is, then we will help them get to that destination. And then utility assistance. Don't do a lot of that through this, but sometimes folks have housing opportunities, but they can't actually take advantage of that housing opportunity because they can't turn the utilities on because of past due debt. If we could take care of that to help them thrive, in the next spot we'll do that. The next slide is a breakdown, and I think you'll find this interesting, of the zip codes that these folks were at, whether they were sleeping on the street or within a Providence shelter. They were considered literally homeless in the city of Providence. These are the zip code breakdowns of that 261 folks and where they were at the time that we were able to house them. And this has been a great community effort. It's the best part for me about this whole intervention is my opportunity to get out into the city of Providence and meet with folks. The next slide, I'll be adding this little group onto the bottom of this slide. These are all organizations that I've been able to go out, have this training or this conversation about this presentation, and partner with all these different folks. A lot of times what happens, I'll speak for myself as I have blind spots, right? One, just who I am, but two, like where I work in the homelessness world. So that's kind of what I see. A lot of organizations you'll see on this list are folks who are not in the homelessness world. So it's nice to get different perspectives, different questions, different ideas, and then different resources from all these groups. So that is a basic overview of housing problem solving, and then a little more specifically of what we've done in Providence. And now I'm ready for questions.
Okay, said a lot. All right, we're gonna open it up to the committee first. Do you have any questions? Councilwoman Peterson.
Going back on one of the slides that you had presented, something here, I just was hoping that you could elaborate a little bit. It says percent of households we contact in the house.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that? That's 30%.
Sure. So we can go to that slide if it's still available. It's probably the second and third slide.
Second or third in, yeah, sorry.
So yeah, that number is, and you can see, you can do the math too. For those of you watching at home, you can do the math. We have had 2,000 before this. Before. One more. There it is. So we have had conversations. We get referrals. Right? We get referrals from the coordination system. We get referrals from outside providers, whether it's Federal Alabama, House Help, coalitions and homelessness, all over the place. We make referrals. We have conversations with households. We had conversations with 2,771 households, right, who are experiencing homelessness. We have housed 834 of them. That's 30%. Right, so that's that breakdown. There are some households that call us and haven't made that list because they've heard something, and they'll call and say, hey, I gotta pay my iPhone bill. I'm like, that's really not what we do here, and maybe we can help them with something else or give them referral source. So I wouldn't count those as households experiencing housing crisis or homelessness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
Awesome.
Just wondering if it was something more than.
And please check on that too, because I don't know.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Green.
My question or observation, When we had the Rhode Island, housing here, they were talking about the majority of the homeless were in Providence. But I'm looking at this and you said the majority of the ones that you were able to house from Providence was 261 out of the 834,
So
which means there's like 573, right? If the majority of them are in Providence, why is there such a big discrepancy in that?
that's a great question and good observation. I would say, one is that first number, that large number of the 834 house, that's also a longer time frame. Okay, so that's going back an extra year, started in 2021, Providence 2022. So you have that. That's also statewide. It's statewide, and at times we have other funding sources, like Karen mentioned at first. We may have other grants that we're able to use, in other states or other cities. That number is specifically Providence over the past year and a half. So it's a shorter period of time and with a smaller bit of money. Does that make sense? There is the majority of folks experiencing homeless farm products. I would totally agree with that. But doesn't mean that we're not helping people outside of that.
Oh,
Right.
I understand that. It's just that if the majority here, it seems like a bigger slice to me. But you're saying it was a shorter period of time.
Two different.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I'm assuming, and I know what they say about assuming. The average for, I was wondering if it had something to do with the average cost
Yes.
to house, because it seems like 2034 is the price for Providence, and then the average is like
Yes.
18. So does that have anything to do?
So that has to do with, well, one, good eye. So what the reason for that is, with the specific monies that we're getting from the city of Providence, we have a little bit more flexibility in how we can use them compared to other grants that we use around the state. So typically, we can only help with security deposit and say first month's rent. With the Providence ones, sometimes we can go a little longer. We can do security and maybe 3 months rent or 2 months rent, right? We can have a little more flexibility to stabilize someone a little longer, especially with somebody who is, has been on the street for a while and really is going to benefit from some sort of case management once they're housed. It's always been a fear for us, like we don't want to use one of these interventions to get someone housed and then just leave them there, right? So if somebody has a very high vulnerability and we're housing them outside of the system, they're going to need the support. So if we can parlay them into like our clinical team to do some case management through whether it's Medicaid or something like that, we want to make sure that they're supported with that homelessness proofing case management piece so they can thrive. So that's what that is. The extra money is because we can pay extra rent.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback on that, because that was my next question. Is this including the wraparound services? For being, you said they're out of this, basically out of the system, basically. Can we still, so we're able to use those monies towards the wraparound, to wraparound system, is in the wraparound being trying to find other funding to make sure that they can sustain longer than a month or the 3 months.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. No, we don't really provide long-term or wraparound services to stay with the household. We do make sure that before we pay for rent for somebody, that they have the income to support the unit going forward. This is a big piece for us. Otherwise, I think we'd be throwing away a lot of money, right? But if we can show, if they can show by award letters or income, earned income, something like that, they can show that they have enough to support the unit going forward. Awesome. Sometimes a couple people will double up and say, hey, we can afford this together, and we'll help them like
I
that.
want to supplement your answer, because we do have other housing programs where we do provide that wraparound. So when I rent rapid rehousing, rental assistance, permanent supportive housing, we do have those wraparound services. This is more for folks where generally they just need that one-time bit of assistance. When we've gone back to look at the people that we've housed through this program, well over 90% are still in their houses.
Yeah, it was 96.5 when we looked 3 months ago.
That's a nice percentage.
All right. My question. I'm really curious to what kind of conversation that you have with the people when they come, and how long, is it counseling? Is it something people come back for? What is this conversation that is able to change the needle here?
That's a good question. It depends on the situation, right? I mean, we're gonna have different conversations based on what we're presented with. We like to ask a lot
I'll
of
give you a
people.
scenario,
Sure.
seeking you around that. There's a house fire, and people in the house are displaced from that. And no place else to go. I know Red Cross do what, 1 day or something like that, and then they say call Crossroads. What kind of conversation would you have with a victim that experienced that? Just as phone.
Yeah, I think, well, the first few questions I would ask about the Red Cross assistance, have we taken advantage of this? What other assistance?
They have, it's only 1 day, they told them to call you, so they called you.
Sure, no, that's fine. So I guess I would first ask if they have identified any other places that they've identified, family, friends, anything like that. If there's a family member that says, hey, I can't have you stay here, my grocery bill's high enough. Well, that situation, maybe we can help with that. What if we give you a $500 Stop and Shop card? Can that help, right? So I start exploring what's in your life, what's working best, who do you have in your life that we can talk to? Is there a family member that may let you stay there if we help with utilities or food? Is there something like this? If we start exploring these different things and there's no other option, then I'm gonna start asking about system stuff. Have you contacted the coordinated entry system yet? Because there's a chance you may temporarily access a shelter before you're rehoused or something like that. So we start having that conversation. And then we slowly work into, if you have ongoing income, there is a potential, if you can't identify anything with your income, that we may be able to help you with Social Security down the line. But I start there to see where they're at. If I can refer them to other places that help. Kind of wrap services, but not after their house, right? It's beforehand. And it's all the community partners we have. I mean, we have amazing organizations in this state. It's unbelievable. And there's, I know anytime I want, I can call you, I can call Sarah, they're back here, I can call them and say, hey, I have a question, let's bounce this off each other, let's figure out how to help this house. So yeah, those are the basic questions that we got.
So you're sort of like a coach, you coach people into like all the options they may have.
Yeah,
If they don't have those options, then maybe you step in somewhere the other.
Sure, we're like the coaches, but then we're also in a way, we're like Sherpas, right? Our housing systems are really confusing to navigate, right? I can't just go to Mount Everest and climb it. I need to hire a Sherpa to bring me up that mountain.
So you go through all of that.
Right, so yeah, we can help them navigate this stuff and yeah, absolutely.
Right. And this all started in 2021, your program?
This official, it did start, oh no, our housing problem solving started in 2021, January, late December 2020, when we switched over the call center to the coalition. The Providence specific stuff started in January 2022.
Okay, and that's new. I'm just trying to figure out what FAN does. That's new. And you've been able to help this many people since you started your particular, I'm talking about your area. Your area sounds exciting, like I'll go to you and you'll be able to just at least help me understand what I'm up against, right?
Yes, and we're brutally honest, which is important. We don't give people a false hope like, oh, we're gonna get you there, I'm gonna put you on this list. Listen, if we don't have something, we will say, we don't have anything in your situation. And we may be able to do some more handoffs to other agencies that might, right? Funding is a funny thing. Sometimes agencies have the funding for this, sometimes they have it for that. So, which is again, why it's important for us as providers to talk to each other and say, hey, what do you have Can you help in this situation? So,
And your program, how's your program funded? It says through the city, what, it's
the
not our general fund. Right?
CHS,
It's the $495,000 is for the.
oh, that was,
It's,
yeah,
okay, yeah, I just wanted to know, opera's going away.
We have very generous private donors that are also helping us fund.
Oh, okay.
Trying to backfill.
Okay, because they are interested in Dan's program as well.
But also, yes, and the state just put out their RFP through the Consolidated Homeless Fund, and they're creating a statewide housing problem solving. So this isn't something that Crossroads invented. This is a best practice. It's part of the President Biden's all-in plan. There's a whole section on housing problem solving. The National Alliance has done a lot on that, on the housing problem solving. So
Yeah.
the state is looking to get more involved in funding through the housing department.
Yeah. Before, I got one more, because this is a good one. These little, figurines that you gave us.
yes,
Is people actually housed in those areas that you have pointed out? I see Coventry, I see all these places, and people really get housed in those areas. Are people doing their fair share of really taking the burden of housing off province?
those areas are, it's not, those sectors not specific to zip code.
They're not,
No,
but they got
That's-
areas though, they got like.
I just wanted, again, my full presentation had a slide with that, and my next slide showed the city without those, and as I was to be talking, those folks have been kind of going away, but it doesn't translate the same or hit the same. Good thing I didn't put music to it.
Yes.
But do you see when you're trying to reconnect households to housing, communities outside of Providence having apartments that are affordable that people can go to? Or is it primarily Providence?
People know where they're going. Yeah, no, they're going out, a lot of them are outside the province, a lot of them are in Providence, it's whatever they can afford at the time. So the folks who are street homes in Providence, who we're helping to house, if they've identified a unit in Socket, we're gonna help them get into that unit. Yeah, they don't have to find a unit in Providence.
And second, I don't understand this map because these people are not sharing either. This is the city of Providence, you know?
Yeah, that's my bad. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I know, I really, yeah, when I see maps, I definitely work a lot with maps and say, where do most of the bulk of stuff happens, right, and everything. So, yeah,
Well,
there was another question and then I can look up in, I don't know how to see, you know, oh, this is good, we're just trying to understand. I hope you don't think,
no.
there was one more and then I. Oh. Do you have any relationship or do you work with community, Center for Community Justice, Center for Justice?
We will do referrals to the Center for Justice.
Because that's how you help most of these people that you're talking to that almost moved from their homes.
No, if somebody has contacted us and maybe they have an eviction on the record, they're looking to maybe do something with that, we will do referral to Center for Justice. Yeah.
Chris?
I just
Thank you,
want,
Ben.
yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. My question, as I understand it, the housing problem solving program is different from the CES list. So can you talk about a little bit of how you prioritize households coming into your program? We have heard from CES on how folks are prioritized and how they're given a score of vulnerability. But for your program, how do you take that as, do you prioritize families? Is there or households? Is there a way that you do that? Or is it like first come, first served?
No, the only prioritization is really that they need, for most of our grants, most of our funding, they need to be literally homeless. If they are, and we'll have a conversation with anybody. We don't do an assessment to determine their vulnerability. If we have a conversation and we can identify a way so they can help, we can help them resolve their own homelessness faster than utilizing the system, then we'll do that. So there's not really a prioritization list that we use. We are looking at everybody on that list trying to call everybody, getting referrals from as many people as we can, and having conversations all day long to all kinds of people about whatever it is they need. Because we want to identify and target where the need is and help those folks to thrive in better situations. So there's not really a prioritization. It's like the rest of coordinated entry acts with an assessment, a score, you know what I mean? So we'll work with anyone.
And then if I may add, so working in the shelter piece, we also do the housing problem solving, so they may enter shelter. And then if we have folks there that have been talking with the case managers and say, hey, listen, I just need personal security. Then those folks will talk to our housing problem solving team and work it out and get them out of shelter that way. So it's not just a one-time thing. If they enter shelter, then it doesn't happen, no, it continues throughout the program.
Right.
And our hope is to get them out of shelter into housing and not to have to go to another shelter and the back up.
Yeah, I've had the case managers in the shelter lay the groundwork. The case managers in other organizations will lay the groundwork, and we'll kind of be able to have these funds at the end to kind of like push it over the finish line, right? But yeah, it's that's the possible.
Just a quick question, what's the wait time for a family that's going through this process? Is it, I know it sounds like it kind of fluctuates, it can be pretty immediate. And it, you know, and other times it can be a little bit longer. What's an average?
It can be, I don't know. It can be longer for some and shorter for some. It's really hard to find a apartment right now. It's another thing we do is we can refer folks to housing navigation services, but really the ownership is on folks to find a unit. They find a unit, they come back to us, hey, I found a unit. Great, we need a lease, we need this, we need all these, the things we need. But yeah, it's not really, it's happened quick in the past, or it's taking a little longer sometimes. Because folks are identifying a unit, or sometimes folks that maybe they started a job, they don't have I'm getting hours, I'll get more hours in a couple weeks, they don't have the income yet. And they come back to us, I've got the income, I found the unit, so it just depends. There's not, I don't know, have a set time.
Any more questions? Thank you so very much for this presentation. Thank you. Both your presentations were great, but I ask you to please stick around because we're gonna ask the public to give us comments. And in that same breath, maybe they may have a question for you, or maybe something that can be answered, clarified. Okay? So with that being said, Madam Clerk, could you please read the third item into the,
Item 3, public comment.
all right. I ask people if you want to speak, I guess I can take popcorn hands because I will dare have them identify themselves and sign a little paper. I'm getting there. Oh, okay, come on up, young lady, please, to the table, sit in front of the clerk, please, ma'am. It's better. Councilwoman. Yes, please. Identify yourself for the record.
Excuse me. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair, for having me. Yes, I can. I was listening to the presentation and I had a couple of
You
concerns.
get your name for record, please. Just give me a little pad to sign. Thank you.
My name is Bella. The concerns, for us, how are you able to waive?
Are you talking to Crossroads?
Yes, please.
Please, could you guys come back to the table so that way we can have a conversation, that way we don't have to screen on that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
How are you able to waive the background checks? The credit reports? And get the references for these people? Those with mental illness, those who may have felonies, those who may have something incriminating in their background. Or because there's a lot of biases out there. I have another question, if I could just throw them all together, they're not really hard.
Do you want them to respond? Let's let them respond, because whoever gets this.
We don't waive those things. If those types of things are up to the landlord, what they want to do with their unit, right? So if that's what they're looking for is a DCI or a credit check, and sometimes if there's something on the landlord doesn't like, we would be happy to have a conversation with the landlord. Let them know like, hey, we're working with this person, and they're working hard, they have, we verified their income, those kind of things, but we're not able to waive those.
Okay,
But can I just clarify, so Ben is talking specifically about housing problem solving, we have a lot of other housing programs that have different criteria, and much of what the housing problem solving, which is what we're here to talk about today, what we do, what we can and can't do is driven by the funding requirements of the contract and what HUD allows for. So when Ben may say that, that may be true for one program, but not for all of us. So I just wanted to clarify that.
right, and the average loan in the city of Providence program is 1,800, 2,200, and that's bottom. Could you tell me how much an hour a person would have to make in order to pay their rent every month? Because I know the minimum wage is about $15 an hour, and for many others, much lower. So would they be able to maintain that rent after we give them a month and maybe an allowance of 3 months? Or is it set up for failure?
Sure, that's a good question. I can't say how much someone would have to make an hour for the average. I'm not very good at math right now. I will say in our program, we have it set up where, and I'm speaking for housing problem solving specifically. We're gonna help somebody secure a unit first month security. The way right now we have a rule set up where it kind of depends on if it's a month-to-month lease or 6 months or longer. Okay, if it's just a month-to-month lease, there's a lot of landlords only want to do month-to-month. Makes me a little nervous sometimes. So on a month-to-month lease, we don't want the person to be more than 50% rent burden, right? So if the unit is $1,000 a month, they have to make $2,000 a month. That's a hard rule for us. If there's a 6-month lease or longer, we're a bit more flexible, and we actually go to 75. We don't want someone to be on a 75% rent burden. As long as it's a 6-month lease, we establish a tenancy, and we hope for people that once they're in there, they will thrive and they'll make it. So that's what we do.
I'm not very good at math either, but I believe it's around $25 an hour. And I don't know anyone who is low income that makes that amount of money, whether they are on SSI, whatever the cost, $50 an hour is the minimum wage. So it is really set up for failure. The little graph that you showed where it was reflecting that there's all these people in 261. It seems to me like a lot of our people are being pushed in a corner somewhere and hidden, like they are an eyesore from society. They're being pushed in a far right corner, tucked away, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with the movie Good Signs. But that's what, let's make a project, let's put them all in it. They say, low income, it's not going according to low income, it's going according to a median salary of what is going on in that community. So all these people are waiting, they're trying to figure out their lives, if they can stay with an aunt, cousin, uncle, whatever, which I'm certain they have their own hardships. Well, they're trying to figure that out, and they don't have a phone, or they don't have a mailing address, and they don't have access to them. What is going on with them when you're going through your stack of other people waiting on that list? Like, how long does it take to serve them? Is it a week? Is it a month? What is your overturn time?
So the conversations that we're having with the folks is really based on what resources and strengths they have. And they are empowered to make the decisions about where they want to live. So if they want to live with a family member and that family member says, yes, they can live with us, but we need help with food or utilities, then we can work that out. The underlying premise is it's better for families and individuals to stay in their apartment or with a family member rather than going to a shelter or living in their car. So that's where they want to live and the resources and strengths they have. When they're in crisis, they might not realize that those are their strengths, and that's the conversations that the team is having with them, is to help them identify that.
Those are very pretty words, because empowered and strength. Giving them the option to live with your family member. Or be on the streets. They're not really good options, and that's not empowerment. That's a crisis.
Yeah.
So the word empowerment, and all those pretty words need to be taken out of that vocabulary, because it's extreme circumstances. Housing should be a right. It should not be a privilege. And right now, in Providence, Fox Point, there were 25 units removed. Housing, help and assistance during COVID. To remove them, the lease went up, and where was housing to fix those homes? They were removed, they were stripped from their vouchers to move a voucher, gotta be from this state to that state, and put in Section 8.
If I may respond to your, what you just said, we agree with you 100%. We believe that housing is a right for everyone. We also have over 370 units of housing. But when someone comes to us off the streets that have no other options, we're trying to help them problem solve. We don't want to see anybody on the street. We also don't want to increase shelters. We want to increase housing, which is what our organization is doing. So when they come to us and they have no other options, and when Ben and his team are talking to them about different options that they have at the time, and they say they have some place to stay with, someone can say, we want to be able to help them at that moment. If that is their only option. What we have is 311 beds of shelter. We'd like to reduce that and have more housing, and as we build more housing throughout the years, we'd like to do that. But if that's where they are at the time, that's where we're helping them. If we don't have housing available to give them on that spot. If we did, we would want to end homelessness. We're trying to do our piece of that, and that's when Ben talked about offering them the options that they have available. And yes, we want empowerment, because we don't want to force anybody for a shelter. Someone came to us today and said, listen, I have no place to stay tonight. Can you help me out? Sometimes, like Karen had mentioned, people in such a crisis, you can't really think. When you're in a crisis, when sometimes you're not thinking about other things. When you're able to slow down and have somebody who's there to help you, let us talk about the options that you have right in front of you now. So we're not trying to create more homelessness for folks. We're trying to get them off the streets. And that's the piece that we're talking about.
Okay, do you mean,
Can you sort of get to your last?
this will be my last.
Thank you, honey.
Do you mainstream? Do you put them in Fox Point? Do you put them in Blackstone Boulevard? Do you put them in East Public? Do you put them amongst the wealthy, the middle class, or do you tuck them away in a corner?
We don't tuck anybody away.
Or where are they?
We let them go where they choose to go.
Could you please have a list awarded to the location of where these people have gone? And who is allowing month-to-month leases? And if it's up to just 6 months, because I don't want to know that I can only do something in 6 months. I can't get the rest of my head on that pillow, because in 5 months, I'm out of a house.
Yeah, it's not in 6 months. I'm saying the amount of income required to access the unit or get our help. If at least 6 months, what we want to see, we want it to be long, right? We want it to be a year, 2 years, would be great. We like it when the tenancy is established through a lease. Lease is a good thing.
And so my question, I didn't get into, have they been mainstream? Have you had housing in Fox Point? Have you had housing in Blackstone Boulevard? Have you had housing in the wealthy areas?
I don't have a list in front of me of everywhere we provide housing.
Can I just 1 second stop right now, and thank you for that question. I'm gonna ask you, please, Lynn, to provide, Chris Brown, where you've been able, from your report, from the party, you've been able to, where you've been able to house people at? Is that possible for us to get that information?
Exactly, I can't give you, I can't give you exact address where people have.
We're not, no address, I'm not
I
asking.
can give you cities, I can give you the towns.
Okay, could you please provide that for our policy people, and we'll have that later on.
Okay, but these- With all due respect, you're not asking for, private information. We're not asking you to breach confidentiality. We're asking you for the rent places that are publicly rented. And that should be available, because I may want to rent from one of them.
I will be happy to give you some towns.
Please provide whatever you to our policy. Thank you for that
Thank you.
question. And please follow up. Thank you, ma'am.
Madam Chair, if I might, I just looked up what the hourly housing wage is in the city.
Stella, she's been able to look up something for you while you were speaking. I think that this is important for you. Chris, continue.
According to the National Low Income Housing's most recent out of reach report, the average hourly wage throughout the zip codes in Providence needed to afford housing is between $23 and $36 an hour.
And that's HUD. Coming from HUD,
National Low Income Housing.
National Low Income. Thank you. Is there any other? I mean, that would like to say. You're welcome. Anybody else? Well, if we hear no other comments from the public, at this time. Well, you have to, please, you have to attend in front of the table, sit in front of the clerk, please, sir. And, give her your name. For the record, and she's got something to sign.
Hello, speaker. Everyone, my name is Josh Franco, and just one concern. While I'm writing this down, I just want to know the line budgeted to the $1.5 million.
Say that louder.
I just want to know the line budgeted to the $1.5 million.
The
Like,
line budget is speaking
yes,
Emily from the city.
because at the same time, you can have statistics, and you've got to break it down to where you say. That's it. The $1.5 million and
Oh, so that's what. we
Yes.
said. So we can provide that to the committee, in general. It went to, rental assistance, so this chart shows the rental assistance, security deposit, transportation out of state, and utility assistance, so that on average. The house, the money doesn't go directly to the households, it goes to the landlord and or the utility companies. But it equates basically to on average $2,000 per household supported.
is there a survey that's done within the community, within the homeless shelters, to where the money should be spent? You want to say, because I worked in a few homeless shelters, and one thing I can say is this: there's no transition, mental health transitions to where they can get jobs, so that they can be adequate, so they can be sustainable. That's my recommendation. Because at the same time, if we don't do that, we're gonna see the problem over and over and over. And we're gonna be here 5 years. That's all I got to say. Well, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. All right. If there's no. We'll have to come to the table. Your names, work, please.
Hello, committee members,
Good afternoon.
and I guess community nonprofits.
Name for the
My name
record,
is
please.
Joseph B. Buchanan, president of the Blackfield Advisory Committee. President of the Blackfield Advisory Committee, Let's go back to the progress. What I'm here for is I hear all this money being cut back, you've been my neighbor for a long time. I've noticed that inside the Crossroads, you have a third floor where guys live. That is true. The trouble. If you're telling us that you're gonna provide safe, sanitary housing for our people that are already home. You're telling me that you're gonna be providing social services for our people when I don't see it going on over here right now. You're telling me you want more money provided for shelter as opposed to low income food. Well, I know our people can afford low income housing. They can't afford affordable housing, what you guys are trying to put us in. Because we don't make that kind of money. Once we start looking at low income housing, make her do it, job. Because her shouldn't have to go in job. And I just want to say that some of you housing organizations, they're supposed to be taking care of this homeless. You're not doing it. You're making money. You're not taking care of it. That's called stash out. So if you truly want to take care of home, they don't let someone do yourself. Come back.
That is, sir, for the record. Is that it?
For the record,
All right. If there's no more business before this body, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion been made by Councilman Gray, second by Councilman Peterson.